Welcome to an Autistic Girl and Her God podcast. My name is Nikki. I'm your host, and welcome to episode 1. I'm so excited. This has been a project in the making for years now. I felt the Lord tell me a couple of years ago to start this podcast, and I fought him. I pulled a Jonah, and I ran until I couldn't run anymore. So here I am saying, yes, God, I will do it. And let's see what happens, shall we? Thanks for being here. Each episode I want to start with a scripture of the day. This is a scripture that I feel each episode is centered around. Today's scripture is Psalm 139, 13 through 18. This is the New Living Translation. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous, how well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake up, you're still with me. I love that verse. I love those verses. I love them so much. I normally drink tea. I'm a tea drinker. And so today I have my fancy little teapot and my super cute little teacup. And today's tea is a cinnamon tea because I'm feeling a little spicy today. Maybe a little neuro-spicy. I don't know. I love that word. Anyway, so as I drink my tea, and let's dive into neurodivergence. I want to start by defining neurodivergence by the world standards. What does the world say about neurodivergence? Let's take a look at that together. A Johns Hopkins article on neurodivergence in the workplace says, according to Cleveland Clinic, neurodivergent is a non-medical term that describes people whose brain develops or works differently for some reason. This means the person has different strengths and struggles from people whose brains develop or work more typically, also known as neurotypical. While some people who are neurodivergent have medical conditions, it also happens to people where a medical condition or diagnosis hasn't been identified. So essentially, neurodivergent means different brain. And rather than there existing a clear-cut black and white separation between different and normal brain functions, it can be viewed as a spectrum that people can fall anywhere on depending on the severity of their identified or unidentified mental illness or lack thereof. So that is from Johns Hopkins. What falls under the umbrella of neurodivergence? You have conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dyslexia, Tourette's, some mental health, and acquired neurodiversity. At least that's what they list under their umbrella. There are some other things that might fall under that depending on who you talk to, but that's Johns Hopkins umbrella. So first big question we're going to tackle today, is everybody neurodivergent? The answer is no. No, they're not. Neurodiversity is considered the big pool of people that exists. You have neurotypical and neurodivergent. We're all neurodiverse. We all fall under that umbrella, but we're not all neurodivergent. Though we do see more neurodivergence these days thanks to procreation. Back in the older generations, different brains were seen as mental health issues that needed medication, possibly mental institutions, and adult care homes. They were not allowed to procreate. But now we've grown so much as a society and we're learning more about neurodivergence every single day. So many neurodivergent people are able to lead semi-normal lives, and still some neurodivergent people are slipping under the cracks and never diagnosed, and they struggle every single day. And that's where my story begins. I grew up feeling like I really didn't fit in, and I tried so hard to be like the other girls. I read magazines, I tried to style my hair and my makeup, like celebrities. I watched a lot of celebrities and read about them in magazines and watched their movies and tried to do my hair flip the way they did. And, I really mimicked and tried to look like those girls because I thought that whatever they were doing was the key to success. It's the key to fitting in. So I tried dressing like the popular girls, but here's the thing, I hated clothes shopping. So as much as I wanted to wear those popular clothes, I always felt like they were so itchy and uncomfortable, and the tags and the hate it. Stores would overwhelm me and I would get so tired. And eventually I'd just walk out of the store with whatever I could find. I didn't care if it fit or if it was popular or comfortable. I just wanted to get out of the store. So a lot of times I would go home with things that I didn't even like, but because I was so tired and I was too nervous to put them back, I would just buy them and take them home. My attempts at styling my hair and makeup this way led me to standing out even more. So it sort of defeated the purpose of trying to make me fit in, and I stood out more. I became the brunt of the classroom jokes. I even had a boy write me a note asking me if I'd be his girlfriend, and I was so excited because I really liked him, only to find out it was a joke. The whole thing was a joke. Another boy actually wrote the note. And then another time, I asked a boy if he would go to homecoming with me, a different boy. I really liked him. He told me that he was moving to France, and his plane left the day of the homecoming dance. This was my life. This is what I dealt with. But instead of realizing that it was other people's decisions and it had nothing to do with me, I actually internalized all of this. And I decided that it must be me. I must be broken. And no matter what I did, I could not catch a break. I could not seem to connect with anyone through middle and high school days. So I just kind of started keeping to myself. I had my handful of my friends that understood me, and I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to them, but it was pretty small. They were pretty small groups. I always loved music, and I always wanted to be like a famous singer. And I had some talent, so I spent as much time singing as I possibly could. It was relaxing and so calming to me. I loved singing. And I've actually been called a human jukebox because of all the songs I know. I didn't discriminate when it came to music back then because I could learn it pretty quickly, whatever genre it was. So I learned my mom's music, and I learned my music, and whatever else was on the radio. I just found a home in melodies and harmonies within music. But jazz was my favorite, though. I could literally feel the music as like it was coursing through my veins, and I could feel it in my body. And to this day, I can put on jazz and it can stop me in my tracks and pull me into this super deep, calming place like no other genre can. I also found a home in Jesus. When I was 8 years old, I met Jesus, and my life has literally never been the same. He became my very best friend, and I wanted to live for him, and so I held myself to higher standards. In high school, I didn't drink alcohol or spend time alone with boys. And of course, this alienated me even more. But I knew it was the right thing to do. And so I stayed on that sort of straight and narrow path. And I was obsessed with the human body and everything medical. So, in fact, I actually carried around a medical dictionary that I'd purchased at a garage sale. And I studied that thing so much. I knew so much about the body as a young kid because of my medical dictionary. I had every intention of being a doctor one day. And actually, my brain works a lot like, if you've seen the show The Good Doctor, that character, the autistic character, Sean Murphy, he's a doctor in the show. My brain works a lot like his. And so I can see things visually in 2D or 3D, depending on what I'm looking at. And it all kind of like comes alive. And that's kind of how I got through high school. And I have a photographic memory, so I could picture the exact page that the information was on and get the answers from my memory of the page in the book. Very visual memory. And yeah, I had significant mental health issues when I was younger too. The stress and the pressure to fit in was so overwhelming to me. School I could do the work. That was fun for me. But the social piece, not so much. Plus, I was always in pain. I was always in physical pain. I wasn't as strong as everyone else. I didn't have the stamina. I couldn't keep up physically. I retreated into books a lot. I could devour a book in a couple hours if I wanted to. And I daydreamed about the day that I could graduate and I could just have my own life and be alone or get married and have babies too. I wanted that too. I'll save the rest of this part of my story for another episode. But eventually I did get married. And after 5 years of very painful infertility, a massive surgery, and a whole lot of prayer, we finally had our sweet miracle baby boy. But surprisingly, motherhood did not come easy to me. I thought for sure when I became a mom, because I'd waited so long, I was going to be great at it, right? Like, I've been babysitting my whole life and I'm going to be a great mom. But something happened instead, and I felt more overwhelmed than I wanted to. I was more angry than I wanted to be. and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Now, I loved my son more than the air in my own lungs, but something happened inside of me that just made me feel like I wasn't in control anymore. And it scared me pretty badly. And I felt like a failure as a mother. No, I don't think it was postpartum depression. I know that was your next thought, but I will dive into what I think it was in another episode. My son didn't develop as typically as the other kids, and I figured it was probably fine. Kids grow at their own pace, right? Well, at least that's what everyone would tell me when I expressed any concern. I even asked his pediatrician, why is he not speaking yet? And the doctor told me it was because I wasn't reading him enough books. I should be reading him something like 5 to 10 books a day. So it's my fault that he's not speaking yet. More shame, more self-blame. Great. One night I sat at the table and I painted a picture. I was trying to do that, whole mom self-care thing where you take care of yourself. So I put out my paints and my canvas and was trying to figure out what I wanted to paint. And so I just decided to free paint and not have anything in my mind that I wanted to paint. Just spiritually paint. Just let it out and get messy with it. Now, I'm not a painter. That's not a skill I possess. However, I like the messy piece of it, just getting into it piece. I love that. So that's what I was letting myself do that day. Now, at this time, I had no knowledge of autism whatsoever. I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it. I was just painting in the spirit and not even really thinking about anything. And when I came back sort of into the experience, I had painted a bunch of colorful puzzle pieces, like a frame in the canvas. And inside of the little frame, I had written an A.W. Tozer quote, which is, outside the will of God, there's nothing that I want. And inside the will of God, there's nothing I fear. I had no idea what I was painting prophetically that day. I didn't know anything about the puzzle piece. I didn't know any of that. Fast forward a few years, and at the age of 4, my son was finally diagnosed with autism. And I remember crying that day because I didn't understand it. Was it going to live with us forever? What was going to happen? There were so many unknowns. And I was really worried. And I was a little worried that my life was over too. I was a little selfish in that I wondered, what does this mean? And I felt like that was the beginning at the time. I felt like it was like the beginning of the end. I had no idea what was coming. We started occupational and speech therapies. And I remember listening to the therapist, and they would explain things, well, he does this and he does this because of this. And this is how he's experiencing this. And I remember sitting there going, well, I experience things like that. Well, that happens to me too. So I started deep diving and learning everything that I could about autism. And of course, that should be like my first warning sign of like, hey, you're autistic. The deep dive into everything because you have to know every little detail about everything. Well, I was just doing it to understand him better. But in doing that, I actually was discovering my own self. I wasn't prepared for that. So over time, I started to suspect that I might be autistic, but I felt like an imposter. So I tried to avoid it and pretend like it wasn't there. But eventually my curiosity got the better of me. So I just casually joined in a Facebook group for autistic women. And I just wanted to see if there was anything there that showed up that was remotely like me. I'm one of those people that I do my own little science experiments and I need to see it in the wild. I need to know, how does it show up in real life? Don't give me a textbook, because I've learned that those medical books and the textbooks are not always 100% accurate, meaning they don't have all the details or all the stories and the ways that things can present. And so I needed to see what it looked like in the wild. And I was shocked because I felt like every single post that somebody made, it was like they took a page out of my diary. I was just reading my diary all over Facebook. And I'd never seen myself so clearly in a whole group of strangers. I was really starting to suspect that I was autistic, but I had no idea how to go about approaching this with anyone. Surely they would think I was mentally ill for even just trying to pursue this. Or maybe they would think I was just trying to have what my son had. And so I kept trying to push it back in my mind and not think about it. And it would just come right back again, and it would come back stronger. During this time, my younger son, I'd had another son, and he was diagnosed with autism. And it looks really different for him. And I'll share more about the differences in another episode, but I had to go to bat for him just to even be evaluated because it doesn't present in him the same way as it does my older son. Finally, I was brave enough to search around for an adult evaluation for myself. Everybody wanted $1,500 cash, nobody took insurance, and everyone had a year or two wait list. I felt so defeated until I finally found a place that's a few hours south of me that would take my insurance, so I didn't even have to pay anything. And I was so excited. I just knew I was gonna walk in the office. They were gonna take a look at me and be like, oh yeah, she's totally autistic. Like, she's got the look, right? Oh, that's not even close to how it went. I really had high hopes that it was gonna happen that way. At the time, I was pregnant with my daughter, so I drove the few hours south, as uncomfortable as it was, so that I could do this evaluation. And it ended up being a super grueling evaluation, and I struggled my way through it. The evaluator, rather than assuring me, oh, there are no wrong answers, just answer the best you can, it was just, there was nothing, and I felt like I was getting every single answer wrong. By the end, I was just staring out the window, and I was trying not to cry, kind of giving those like yes, no answers. My walls had just come down, and I was tired. I wanted to sleep for days. The evaluator was a male. This is important to note. He might have actually had autism himself because, well, there were some things that he did that I remember thinking, that seems sort of autistic of you. The bottom line is that he knew what autism looked like in young boys, but he was not super familiar with what it looked like in females. And so because of that, he didn't find autism in me. And in fact, he didn't just not find it. He wrote this entire evaluation about me that was not even me. It was, when I read it, I felt like I was reading it about somebody else. And I was just crushed. And it was so off base that even my own counselor told me to rip it up and throw it away and pursue a second opinion if I wanted to. After some time of processing and just kind of getting over the sting of the hurt, I discovered a center locally that's really familiar with females on the spectrum. I work with them all the time and evaluate and diagnose and all that. And it's super important because, oh gosh, it's so important. The differences between men and women on the spectrum are just night and day sometimes. I was grateful to find them, and I had just started learning more about neurodivergence, so I was praying one time about whether or not I should pursue this second opinion. And I remember I prayed and I was like, Lord, why do I even need a diagnosis? Like, why can't I just be happy with how you made me? And, I'll claim neurodivergence and it'll be okay. And I don't need anything other than that. And it's fine. So why do I need to pursue this diagnosis? And I had my hand on my belly because I was pregnant with my daughter. And I happened to look down at my belly, just the loving mom looking down at her belly. And the Lord very clearly said to me, for her. And I knew then that my daughter would be autistic as well. And that this whole process of me fighting for my diagnosis would be to pave the path for her and other autistic females that would come after me. So I was finally brave and I had that second evaluation done, and they unanimously agreed, that I met the criteria for autism. Then an entire unmasking and unraveling process began. And oh boy, was that an intense process. I will unpack that in another episode too. I had to go back and reevaluate my life through the lens of autism. I had spent so much of my life believing that I was broken, that I had all these things wrong with me. And now I had to go back and look at all of those memories and realize, whoa, no, I wasn't broken. I missed social cues because I'm autistic. Or I didn't ever want to eat foods because I'm autistic and I have sensory issues. That's what all the clothes stuff was. So there was such an undoing, and even still today, there's so much that I have to undo in my own brain to reframe it and see it through a different lens. And I had to grieve. I've had to grieve all the ways that I wasn't supported. I had to grieve the fact that nobody really knew a lot about autism, and certainly not how it presented in me. I slipped right under the radar because I just seemed like I was quirky. But my emotional outbursts, my dysregulation, all of that screamed for help in a much deeper way. Now, I don't blame my parents. I certainly don't blame my parents because, like I said, autism wasn't really a thing back in the 80s and 90s. It was mostly just in young boys. So they wouldn't have had any way of knowing. And I still needed to grieve the pain and the loss, even still. Two things can be true. I still think about how different my whole life could have been had I had the support that I needed. I was diagnosed with level 2 autism. There are 3 levels of autism that some people use to figure out just how much support an autistic person might need. Now, the autism world doesn't like the idea of the level. They don't like the functioning, low functioning labels or the puzzle piece, actually, for that matter. But we'll cover those things again in another episode. I share this about myself because it just shows how much I had to do to survive, to even get me to this point right here. I'm still alive. I had to fight for it. A level 1 has lower support needs. Doesn't mean they don't have support needs. It just means it's a little bit lower. They can function a little more on their own. A level 3 is considered high support needs. And I'm right in the middle. I'll share more about what that looks like for me in coming episodes too. So eventually the Lord showed me just how He sees me. And I came to the conclusion that my neurodivergence is not something that I need prayed away. I certainly don't have demons that I need cast out of me. I'm a human who has struggles just like everybody else. It just looks different for me. My brain is not broken. It's just a different operating system. I like to compare it to Windows versus Apple. Not less, not broken. I just need different tools to run successfully. The Lord showed me my worth and He told me that I wasn't broken. And then, I thought maybe I would just be able to do my own thing and, be autistic and enjoy my life alone. He was like, no. He picked me right up and set me on a path to show others that they're also loved and on purpose. That's why I started this podcast. It's also why I started a Facebook group for Christian neurodivergent women, which now has over 15,000 women in it. I also just recently started a group for Christian neurodivergent families, so we can start having the conversation there about how to raise neurodivergent children in an affirming and biblical way. You can find both of those on Facebook. I also created a 30-day e-devotional for Christian neurodivergent women. They're quick 1-minute reads with a scripture and a prayer to think about for the day. You can find that on my website, nikkibeltussis.com. Well, friends, that's all for today. We've covered a lot of ground, and I look forward to our next episode where we'll be talking about how faith and neurodivergent intersect. We'll also dive into the diagnostic process a little bit and how and what that could look like for Christians. I sure hope you enjoyed your time listening today. I really can't wait for the next time. I'm going to leave you with this question to think about. After hearing my story today, what are your thoughts about neurodivergence? Is it what you thought it was? Feel free to comment on any of the podcast social media accounts, or you can email me at the podcast email, which is anautisticgirlandhergodpodcast@gmail.com, because I really truly would love to hear your answers. Blessings to you.